Welcome to Transcendent. I'm Joe, and I'm the dad.
And I'm Ryan, and I'm the daughter. And I have to say, I'm very frustrated.
Why's that?
Well, whoever stole my copy of Microsoft Office, I will find you. You have my word.
Oh.
We'll be back after this. I came across a story recently that got me thinking about my own life. A woman had been very involved in church and doing ministry and all kinds of things. And then she went to a ministry event or some kind of event with LGBTQ folks. And while she was there, she recognized, I think I'm bisexual and I've been repressing a part of myself. She came back from that event. She told her husband, I think there's something we need to talk about. He was very open. He said, thank you for being honest with me. And they sat down. As they went through, they felt like this is a good step forward. But as time went on and she started to explore more and more of who she was, it became clear that they were not going to be able to keep things together. And in fact, from my understanding of the story, he finally decided at one point, this is not going to work out. They had 2 young children. They finally decided this is going to be it for us, and they parted ways and got divorced. And she went off to explore who she was, and he went off his own direction, feeling like, man, this all ended. I felt like I could identify with every side of that story. I feel like I've been in all parts of that. It got me thinking because on the one hand, I was happy for her that she got to figure out who she was. And at the same time, I also felt a little bit sad about what happened. And I thought that's something you and I could talk about.
Didn't you tell me as we prepped for this podcast, I think you said they worked together. That was their vocation. They were working together in the ministry?
I think so. I'm not 100% certain. He was supportive of what she was doing at any rate. I don't know if he was involved in the ministry himself but they were both together. However it was, he was supportive of what she was doing. I'm not sure if he was doing ministry himself or not.
And when she told him that she felt as though she was part of this community, what was his reaction? Was it accepting in the beginning?
Immediately it was accepting.
Uh-huh.
Then as time went on, for whatever reason, and I'm sure I don't know all of the details, I have to fill in pieces of it. But because I've only gotten her side of the story. But my understanding is that at one point he came back and said, this is too much. I've been supportive up until now, but this is too much and I'm not okay with this. I think she said, I thought we were I thought we were on board together. I thought you were okay with everything that we were doing so far. And he said, but this has gone over the line and I can't anymore. And he was the one that called it. And then as she has gone on to talk about her experiences, she's gotten a lot of haters that have come onto her social media and said, how dare you look at what you did to your family and look at what you did to this and that. And I find myself torn because on the one hand, I'm happy for her that she found out who she was. And on the other hand, it's hard to have the breakup of a family. And it was especially hard because it mirrored so much my own story. I thought we could use this as a springboard for me to share my story.
I think our listeners would like to hear that.
Now, this is a hard one, of course, because it brings back all kinds of emotions. Now, I never thought that I would get divorced.
I never thought you would either.
I think everyone around us said we had the perfect marriage. We got along so well and everything went so well. We always worked things out and we always forgave one another. We never let anything simmer. We never went to bed angry. We never had, that's not true. There were times where we would, but we would always work it out. It was,
Yes.
we always dealt with things the right way that you need to deal with things.
And you raised 7 children.
It was, we put a lot of work in on that. But of course, when I came to terms with being transgender, this was not something that was going to go away anytime soon. I couldn't make it go away. And all of the things that I had tried to do to push it down or sweep it under the rug or make it go away it was always there. And like the way that I described it, it's sort of like the Dutch boy that put his finger in the dike to keep the water back. You put your finger in here and then it comes out over here. And then you put your finger in there and it comes out over here. Or like a balloon, with
weak
too
spot.
much. Right. And it's going to get out somewhere. So you can try to pull it back here, but eventually you just don't have it in you to keep pulling it back. And that's how it was for me. I remember meeting with my therapist at the time. And I said, I don't know how I can go forward with this, knowing that this might be the end of my marriage, and especially with all the kids and everything. And she said, actually, this was a spiritual counselor that I was seeing at the time. And she said, you're not doing your kids any favors by trying to bottle up who you are. You're obviously miserable. I can see how miserable you are by looking at you. You need to do what's right for your kids. And in fact, that's what you said to me as well.
Yes, I did.
That there comes a point where the only loving thing I can do for my kids is to stop trying to hide who I am and to let me be who I need to be, because otherwise I can't love them the way that I need to be loving them. And I think in the story that I first read about, I think is something similar with her. And yet, through my whole story, I really believed that we were going to somehow defy the odds and we were going to stay together. I believed that God would make a way for me where there seemed to be no way. Because I had prayed for years and years and years. God, either make this go away or show me some kind of a solution, some kind of an answer, because I don't know what to do. And ultimately, the answer ended up being, there is no other. I can't pray this away. They talk about pray away the gay. I couldn't pray away the trans. I couldn't make this work. I couldn't have a pastor do deliverance on me and make this work. I couldn't have an accountability partner and keep myself from wanting to be who I am. That just was not going to work. And believe me, I tried everything at my disposal, every tool that the church had given me to try to hold this back. And there was no way that I could hold it back any longer. And so I just really hoped that there would be some way, that certainly there would be some way that this could all come together, that it could all work out for good. I believed through it all that it would come around that maybe my ex would finally learn to accept me and say, we're going to go ahead and keep our marriage. And I think she hoped through it that I would finally find my silver bullet that would make this thing magically go away. What she didn't know is that she thought it had magically gone away beforehand, but that's because I had just gotten really good at hiding who I was. And that's no way to live with the most important person in your life. And so ultimately, we came to the point where we both had laid all the cards on the table, and I said, this is how I'm feeling, and this is what I feel like I'm capable of doing. And I don't know how to live and be the person that you want me to be without going back into lies. I can't live an honest life with you and be the person that you need to be married to. And we both sat down and we tried and we brainstormed and scratched our heads. And ultimately, in the end, we said, we can't make this work. That was a difficult decision.
Did you see her at that point as the roadblock? Did you see her at that point as the fault?
I was going to say no, but maybe the answer is yes. I never wanted her to be the roadblock. Nobody wants their partner to be the roadblock. Nobody wants a wife or a husband to be the person that you're fighting against, especially when you're trying so hard to make the marriage work. I was all in. I was not going to retreat. I was never going to give up. I was going to do whatever it took. I figured we said till death do us part, and that's how it was going to be, is till death do us part. I had you guys as my model, and you're still together.
56 years.
And I just figured marriage is till death do us part. But I couldn't control who I am. So the only way I could see is that she would come around. So I don't think I viewed her so much as the problem as it is if she could just see. If she could just see what I'm going through, if she could just fully understand. Well, I'll tell you, she did understand what I'm going through. I think that she understood better than anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
When I did finally transition, we had such a love for one another. And out of love, I remember I had bought a wig. And this was like one of the very first weeks, very first days. And I was trying to figure things out. And this wig was just not working right. And I couldn't make it work. And I didn't know what I was doing. And I had to relearn everything. How to behave and how to everything. I was trying to learn everything. And she came and helped me out and said, here, let me see what we can do. And she helped and she brushed out the wig and she made it work and she put it on and she said, there you go. And that right there, that was love.
Because she also helped you with your mascara, if I remember.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And helped me with some of those basic things early on. Despite the fact that I'm sure it was eating her up inside. She was having to say goodbye.
Yep.
And I think that's the message of this episode. Is that sometimes you can't make it work. Though we try.
At this point, how long had you been married?
It was 14 years when I first started addressing these issues, and it was 17 years by the time we finally got the divorce. It was about 15 years or so, 15 and a half years, where it really came out on the table.
Mm-hmm.
And we were dealing with it. And I said at one point, because it was so difficult, and I said, it's really hard to end 17 great years of marriage. And she turned to me and she said, well, 14 and a half great years of marriage. Those last few years were very difficult.
Sure.
As we were both all in, trying so hard. And yet we both had some values that we felt like we can't compromise. She felt like, I'm married a man. I'm sorry, but if you transition, we can't stay married. I don't understand how you think that I could stay married to you. It doesn't work like that. That is not the person that I agreed to marry, and we can't stay together. And I said, I can't be that person any longer. I have no way. There is no way that I can do it. I've exhausted every single thing that I know to try to keep that going, and there's no way. And ultimately, I think we both know that there was no right answer. But if there was a right answer, we both kind of believed, and if I'm honest, we probably both sort of still do believe in our hearts right now, that maybe if the other one had just compromised a little more. But we both feel like, but there's no way that I could have compromised. And so ultimately, we just had to face up to, we can't make this work. The The hard piece, of course, is that once we did make the decision, people in the community only saw the outside of things.
When you say community, you don't necessarily mean the physical community, your surroundings in that little town. You mean your community of friends, your acquaintances, relatives, etc.
I think I have mostly in mind actual physical neighbors, people in our small town. Also some friends, a wider circle of friends.
Mm-hmm.
Probably some of those. But by that point, in order for me to get the support that I needed, I had already had to develop kind of a new circle of friends to help give me support through this. And so by the time we did really split apart, a lot of the people that were closest to us knew, but the people that were kind of on that second ring outside maybe saw that things were going on, but didn't know what it was. And I would say especially some neighbors that I think, we live in a town that is very stoic. You don't bring up gossip and rumors and things. You don't make a big deal out of things, which was both good and bad. It was good in the fact that nobody was coming up and harassing me when I was in the grocery store or creating problems. But at the same time, I would feel at times like there were neighbors or other people that knew us that didn't understand and that had assumed that I just got on a whim somewhere. I'm just going to go do this thing and I'm going to dress and drag from here on out because this seems like a fun thing to do. And who cares about my family? Just throw that thing away.
People do think that. I know. They just think, well, you don't have to do that. What are you doing that for? It's time to get your head somewhere else.
Right. Yeah, somebody said I had my head somewhere where the sun doesn't shine.
Exactly.
And that comment really, really hurt. Not because I thought that he was right, but because in the midst of all of this, I wasn't sure that he wasn't. You can't be. You can't go through all of this stuff and be 100% certain that you're doing the right thing. And it's really hard knowing that we're making these lifelong decisions that are going to affect all of these kids and not know. It's hard to know, is this the right answer? I wish that the people that were judgmental towards me had taken time to understand, had come and said, could you tell me a little bit about what you're going through? I had a friend from high school that approached me and said, I'm concerned about what you're doing. And we sat down and I explained to him. And I said, look, I've been through everything. I've tried everything that I know, and I can't make this work any other way. And after we had a heart-to-heart for about 10 or 15 minutes, he looked at me and he nodded and he said, all right, then I accept it. Now, he ended up being accepting but not fully affirming. Although I don't know that even that's the case. It's more just that I was not so much on his radar so that he still largely knows me as who I was. And it's hard for him to make the transition in his mind to know me as who I am now. But those few little windows of judgment were very, very taxing on me. They were taxing not because I thought they were wrong, but because I wasn't sure that they were. And yet, I had gone through, I talked to everybody I knew, I had gotten all the advice I could, talked to every advisor that I could think of, and tried everything I could have. I talked to you, and I talked to a spiritual advisor and a therapist, and friends, and people I respected, and people I trusted, and everything. And ultimately, this seemed like all that we could do. And we went through a year and a half of well, maybe we could try this. Nope, that's not going to work. Maybe we could try this. Nope, that's not going to work. Maybe we could try this. Nope, that's not going to work. And ultimately, this was the only conclusion that any of us could find.
So who suggested, which of you first suggested the idea of divorce?
I think she did, but not because she wanted it. I think I was just very hopeful that I could transition and not lead to divorce. We actually had a rule in our marriage. We would not utter the word divorce. We wouldn't even say the word. Now, we could say it in regards to other people or whatever. It was not an off-terms word in general. But we would never even utter the word in regards to ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Until there was that moment where I said, I don't think that I can keep from transitioning. And I don't remember if there was a conversation or how it went. I did not want divorce to be on the table. But she said, if you do transition, we can't stay together. We probably use terms like that. And I said, are you
Euphemisms.
serious? Yes, I think so. I said, are you sure there's no way that we can make this work? There's nothing that we can do? And we tried every kind of thing. There was just not going to be an answer. She actually had some insight. I had proposed some compromises. Well, what if I just try cross-dressing at certain times? What if we find spaces where I can cross-dress? And she looked at me and she said, that's not going to be enough for you. And she was right. When I did originally transition, the plan was going to be that I would spend the summer transitioning and I would do it outside of work hours. But during work hours, I would still present mail. And as soon as I got a taste of being able to be who I really was, work became the most miserable place for me to be. Because now all of a sudden I was who I was until I had to come into the office. And now I had to go back to, it's like the rainbow colors of Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz. And then you had to go back into black and white living. And I felt so miserable every time I did it. And she saw that. She said, you're not going to be okay. Once you experience the taste of being who you need to be, I don't think she would have phrased it like that. Once you have experienced being who you want to be, I don't think you're going to be able to turn it off. And she was right. She knew me better than that.
I remember you telling me that the most difficult thing for you was when you actually went to court together. You each had your own lawyer. Her lawyer happened to be one of my very good friends. After the divorce, he said that was probably the easiest divorce I've ever handled. He said those are two very good people and very close friends. And he saw that.
My lawyer said the same thing.
Yeah.
He said, this is the easiest divorce I have ever had to work on ever.
Uh-huh.
He could not get over how easy it was.
But when you went to court, what was it that bothered you that you had to say to the judge?
We both had to get on the stand and to say that we had irreconcilable differences. And after all of this time of working, hoping that we could come up with a solution, even at that point, I don't know that I was really convinced that we had irreconcilable differences, but I was convinced that she did. And so I had to get on the stand and say, we have irreconcilable differences. And as soon as those words came out of my mouth, I just broke down and started crying on the stand.
Mm-hmm.
That was really all that I needed to say. They maybe had me say a few other things here and there. And then I came down and we finished the court hearing and we signed the paperwork or did whatever we needed to do. And we left the courthouse. And she said, I feel like a weight has been lifted. Do you want to go get coffee? And I said, yeah, I'd like that. And we drove downtown where there's a little coffee shop, and we went and we got some coffee and some breakfast, and we sat and we talked about all the good times, and we laughed a little bit, and it felt like really good closure to a marriage that I'm really happy that I got to have.
And today, you still are very close.
We're not as close as I had hoped that we would be, because I don't think I realized how the closeness that we had when we were married creates tension afterwards. There's a certain level of closeness that we can't get beyond. We can't be best friends ever, because best friends leads us to want to be too close, except we can't be too close, so we have to back off. But we can be friends.
Mm-hmm.
I've said on this podcast before, sometimes I will describe her as my sister-in-law. And that is as accurate of a term as anything, because it describes somebody who's family. And I believe that she and I would do anything for one another the same as we would for any other family member. If she was in a crisis or if I was in a crisis, I have no doubt that either one of us would drop anything to go and help the other one if we needed it. But we're not going to be going and doing 5-mile runs together. We're not going to be going and doing shopping trips together or doing fun friend kind of activities together. We're family. We support one another. We work together with one another through everything. But we can't be the close friends that we were when we were married.
People are going to be hearing this, not just for the next few weeks, but it might be listened to for months or years from now. People who are going through something like this or think they might go through something like this. I'm in a situation right now that I'm not sure that we can stay together. What can you tell me?
The number one principle behind all of this, all else being equal, I am always on the side of the marriage. When I've had friends that have been going through divorces or going through difficulties in their marriage, and they'll come and ask for support, I have done my best to always be supportive in any way that helps promote the marriage. Now, I say all else being equal because, of course, all else is not always equal. But all else being equal, we live in a culture and a society that is too quick to say, well, we couldn't make it work. I guess we're done. I want to say we gave it our all. When I say we gave our all, we put everything in. I mean, we were all in. We had given everything that we had to make this marriage work. I think oftentimes it's too easy to say, well, I'm not very happy in this marriage. Well, maybe it's time to move on. Well, let's go on. I think that we lose out something there. And in fact, one of the reasons why we have such a good relationship now is because we were all in when we were in. We understand that we had to have the separation, have the divorce, because there were factors that were outside of our control. And we've largely agreed to stop talking about those. But apart from that, we know that we were all in beforehand. So all else being equal, be all in. Say you're sorry where you need to be sorry. Forgive when you need to forgive. Don't let that bitterness stay with you. If you are getting divorced because you have not figured out how to communicate with one another, then figure out how to communicate. There is nothing sweeter than having a marriage that was going through difficulty and you put in the effort and the time and you do the work to come back together, because what you have in the end is so much sweeter than what you had beforehand. So all else being equal, I am always on the side of the marriage. But my next piece of advice is that every situation is different. And ultimately, I can't say for you, I can't give you a blanket statement. There was a time in my life where I felt like I would always be on the side of the marriage, regardless of the factors. And I've seen too many marriages since then, especially in and among the LGBTQ community, but not exclusively, where I've had to face up and say, that was not a good marriage for those people. Especially when there's cases of abuse, physical abuse or emotional abuse, and things that just go above and beyond. Every case is different. Every situation is different. So with all of that, my next piece of advice would be to be as truthful and honest as you can be. When we were going through all of this, there were a lot of things that I had kept hidden about myself. And in fact, that last year, the hardest thing was no longer trying to hide it, because I knew if I could just hide it well enough, we could go back to status quo and we could keep everything how it was. But it was at the expense of a lie. And it wasn't fair to her. It wasn't fair to us. So we got everything out. I said, this is how I really feel. And this is who I really am. This is what I can really do. And this is what I can do and what I can't do. And she said, well, this is who I am and what I can do and what I can't do. And when we came at it from a place of working together, hoping we could find a solution, ultimately, when we found the solution being divorce, we had at least arrived at the decision together as a mutual decision. And the final piece of advice, this is one that we have both stuck to as much as we can since then. Always honor your ex, especially when you're dealing with your kids. Anytime we have had a difference in parenting, I have always tried to support her, and she has always tried to support me. To say to one another, if the kids have said, well, she said I could blah, 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 blah. When they try to play us against one another, we will always try to get with one another right away, always try to speak good about one another. If I disagree with the decision that she's made for parenting, I try never to say to the kids, well, that was stupid what she did. I instead say, well, that's what she said, and I fully support her in what she said. And then I'll go back to her privately and say, hey, I want you to know this is what I told the kids, but I'm not so sure I agree with you here. We have always tried to honor one another. And I think if you talk to the kids, they would say, that is true. We always will say how great the other one is and how lucky they are to have each other in their lives. And I believe that. I believe the kids are lucky to have her in their lives.
And I think our listeners are lucky to have this podcast. Actually, I will tell you that there are people out there right now that you might know who really could use this podcast, could really help to have them come up with understanding of their own feelings, of their own situation, or maybe they have some feedback or some ideas or some thoughts that they'd like to share with us. And if you or one of the listeners you know has something to share with us, write us at transdescendant@gmail.com. We read every one, and we're looking forward to hearing from you.
We're grateful to have you come and join us week after week as we talk about ways that we can promote relationships, as we can figure out how to get along with one another, because relationships in the end are what is most important.
We hope you have a good relationship with us. And if you do, you'll be coming back again next week when we've got another exciting podcast for you.
We'll see you Monday.